While prosperity gospel preachers get criticized for linking faith and fortune, they might actually be onto something ancient. The Bible's financial wisdom predates every modern wealth-building strategy by millennia, and its principles quietly shaped the economic foundations of Western civilization. Most people read the Bible as a purely spiritual text, a guide for prayer, morality, and the afterlife. But embedded within its pages is something unexpected: a comprehensive wealth-building system that predates Adam Smith, Warren Buffett, and every financial guru by thousands of years. From the concept of Jubilee years to the parable of talents, from tithing systems to warnings against surety, the Bible contains startlingly practical economic instruction. This isn't about prosperity gospel or name it and claim it theology. It's about recognizing that Scripture addressed the material world as seriously as the spiritual one, teaching principles of stewardship, multiplication, and generational wealth that still work today. Consider this: Jesus spoke more about money than about heaven and hell combined. 16 of his 38 parables deal directly with finances. The book of Proverbs dedicates more verses to wealth, work, and economic behavior than to almost any other topic. Yet somehow, we've convinced ourselves that the Bible is indifferent to material success, that faith and finance occupy separate, perhaps even opposing spheres. This disconnect has consequences. Generations have been taught that godliness means financial passivity, that ambition is worldly, that wealth is inherently corrupting. Meanwhile, the text they revere contains explicit instructions on investment strategy, debt management, asset diversification, and wealth transfer. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. The truth is more nuanced and more interesting. The Bible wasn't preparing people only for the next life. It was giving them tools to thrive in this one. It understood what modern financial advisors are still learning: that how you handle money reveals and shapes your character, that economic principles have moral dimensions, and that material stewardship is inseparable from spiritual maturity. What we've lost isn't just ancient wisdom. We've lost the integrated vision of a text that refused to separate the sacred from the practical. The parable of the talents is usually taught as a metaphor about using your spiritual gifts. But read it again, stripped of allegorical interpretation, and you'll find something more literal. A story about investment returns and the expectation of financial multiplication. A master entrusts his servants with substantial sums. Talents were not small change, each one worth about 20 years of a laborer's wages. 2 servants double the money. One buries it out of fear. The master's response is telling. He doesn't praise the safe choice. He condemns it as wicked and lazy. This wasn't anomalous teaching. Throughout Scripture, there's a relentless emphasis on fruitfulness, increase, and multiplication. God's first command to humanity was to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it. Abraham was promised descendants like the stars and sand. Joseph's administrative genius multiplied Egypt's wealth during famine. The Proverbs 31 woman considers a field and buys it, plants a vineyard from her earnings, and her trading is profitable. The pattern is unmistakable. God expects return on investment, not just spiritually, but materially. Stewardship in the biblical sense isn't passive preservation. It's active multiplication. You're not supposed to merely guard what you've been given. You're supposed to grow it. This stands in stark contrast to religious traditions that romanticize poverty or view wealth accumulation with suspicion. The biblical model isn't about hoarding or greed, but it's certainly not about stagnation either. There's an assumed dynamism, a built-in expectation that resources should increase over time, that faithful management produces tangible results. Modern readers miss this partly because we've spiritualized everything. When Jesus talks about bearing fruit, we think exclusively of character development. When Paul discusses sowing and reaping, we imagine only spiritual harvests. But the original audiences lived in agricultural economies where multiplication was literal and necessary for survival. They understood that seeds were meant to become harvests, that one sheep should become a flock, that 5 talents should become 10. The multiplication mandate isn't permission for reckless speculation or ruthless accumulation. It's recognition that the created order includes growth as a fundamental principle, and that humans are called to participate in that growth as wise managers of resources. Ownership is an illusion the Bible systematically dismantles. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the psalmist declares, and that theological statement has profound economic implications. You don't own anything. You manage it temporarily on behalf of the actual owner. This isn't semantics. It's a complete reframing of the relationship between people and possessions. In the ancient Near East, this was revolutionary. Kings claimed absolute ownership. Pharaohs were gods who possessed everything and everyone. But Hebrew scripture introduced a radically different model. Even kings were stewards, accountable to a higher authority for how they managed the land and people entrusted to them. The Jubilee year made this concrete. Every 50 years, land returned to its original family. Debts were forgiven. Economic reset buttons were pressed. Why? Because no one owned the land permanently. They were temporary managers. This stewardship model does something clever. It combines the motivation of ownership with the accountability of trusteeship. You manage resources as if they're yours, with all the care and strategic thinking that implies. But you never forget they're ultimately not yours, which prevents the pathologies of absolute ownership like hoarding, exploitation, and the tyranny of inheritance. Consider Joseph in Egypt. He didn't own the grain he stored during the 7 good years. He was managing it for Pharaoh and, ultimately, for the survival of nations. His wealth wasn't measured by what he possessed, but by how effectively he stewarded resources through crisis. The same pattern appears throughout Scripture. Abraham's wealth made him powerful, but his tent-dwelling lifestyle reminded him nothing was permanent. Solomon's riches were legendary, but they served a purpose beyond his enjoyment. Building the temple, establishing trade routes, creating infrastructure. The stewardship framework also explains the Bible's complex relationship with wealth. Riches aren't inherently good or evil. They're resources that reveal whether you're a faithful manager or a foolish one. The rich young ruler failed the test, not because he had wealth, but because his wealth had him. He couldn't imagine releasing his grip on what was never truly his to begin with. Proverbs pulls no punches about debt. The borrower is slave to the lender. Thousands of years before credit scores and compound interest, Scripture understood that debt creates bondage. Not metaphorical bondage, actual constraint of freedom, limitation of options, transfer of power from debtor to creditor. The warnings are relentless and specific. Don't co-sign for your neighbor's debt. Don't put up security for a stranger. Avoid surety like you'd avoid a trap, because that's exactly what it is. This wasn't theoretical moralizing. Ancient economies regularly enslaved debtors. Default meant losing not just your property, but your liberty, sometimes your children. The Bible's debt warnings emerged from watching people destroy their lives through financial overextension. The 7th-year debt release and the Jubilee weren't just about compassion. They were economic circuit breakers preventing permanent underclasses from forming through debt accumulation. Fast forward to modern America, where the average household carries over $100,000 in debt, where student loans have created a generation of indentured servants to banks, where credit cards make it possible to spend money you don't have on things you don't need. The mechanisms have changed, the bondage hasn't. The person making car payments isn't literally enslaved, but try quitting your job when you're 3 payments behind and see how free you feel. The biblical alternative wasn't just avoiding debt. It was building margin, living below your means, creating buffers against crisis. Joseph saved 20% during the good years so Egypt could survive the bad ones. The Proverbs 31. Woman's household doesn't fear winter because she prepared in summer. This is the opposite of our cultural moment where people spend next year's income on this year's lifestyle and hope nothing breaks. Scripture also warned against get-rich-quick schemes centuries before Ponzi schemes existed. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. The wisdom isn't complex. Sustainable wealth builds slowly through patient accumulation, not lottery tickets or speculative bubbles. Yet every generation rediscovers this lesson the hard way. The Bible's wealth principles work because they're built on reality, not wishful thinking. They recognize human nature: greed, fear, short-term thinking, the temptation to exploit. They acknowledge economic laws, scarcity, trade-offs, the power of compound growth. They understand that material and spiritual dimensions of life aren't separate but interwoven, each affecting the other. This integration is what modern readers have lost. We've created false dichotomies: sacred versus secular, spiritual versus practical, faith versus finance. But the biblical worldview refuses these divisions. How you treat your employees is a spiritual issue. Whether you pay your debts is a matter of righteousness. Your generosity reflects your theology more accurately than your doctrinal statements. Consider tithing, often dismissed as Old Testament legalism. But look past the religious ritual and you find a sophisticated system: automatic allocation of resources, priority given to generosity before personal consumption, regular practice that builds discipline, a percentage-based approach that scales with income. These are principles any financial advisor would endorse, wrapped in theological framework. The danger, of course, is reducing Scripture to a self-help manual, treating God as a cosmic ATM who dispenses wealth for the faithful. This is where prosperity gospel goes wrong. It inverts the relationship, making God the means to the end of personal enrichment. The biblical model is subtler. Faithful stewardship often produces material blessing, but blessing isn't the goal. Character formation is. Wealth is a test, not a reward. The question isn't whether you can gain it, but whether you can handle it without it handling you. What emerges from honest engagement with Scripture's economic teaching isn't a prosperity formula, but a wisdom tradition. Work diligently, but rest regularly. Save consistently, but give generously. Plan prudently, but hold loosely. Pursue excellence without idolizing success. Build wealth across generations while remembering your dust. These aren't contradictions. They're the tension points where character develops, where the material and spiritual integrate, where ancient wisdom meets modern application. The Bible didn't just teach faith. It taught a way of living in the world that necessarily includes, material wisdom. To ignore half the teaching is to miss the wholeness of the vision. Please subscribe, comment, and hit the notification button for more interesting videos.